unsolvable problem. I don't think riots in the streets in a country like the U.S. would be tolerated very long. Here's what has to happen. Government has got to step up in a place it's never been. Government has got to step up and go through political party machinations over what time period, whether it's in your country, Tories versus Lib Dems versus Labor, in the U.S., Republican versus Democrat. We need a sustained, continuous commitment by government to a clear direction. The industry can then get behind that clear direction. I say that in my book, we have got to change the governance of energy in Western democracies if we're ever going to make the kind of progress we need to utilize the kinds of energy I'm talking about. Pricing it is not an option. People don't make that much money. Average wage in the U.S. is $38,000 a year. That's not going to pay for a $6 gasoline or $8 petrol like you might have in the U.K. People will be in the streets protesting.
Well,
and the consequence of
when you say that, obviously it's a scary prospect, but is it really true, or are you just simply trying to scare people into supporting the idea that big oil companies should be allowed to continue to exploit a resource which is damaging the planet? Let me just quote to you the words of Anna Aurelio, who directs the Washington office of Environment America. She says, "It simply makes no sense to threaten the coasts of America with future spills and other drilling disasters when we're about to unleash the real solutions to oil dependence, cleaner cars, cleaner fuels." She says, let's switch priorities now, not have this long transition period that you're talking about.
Well, she's obviously never worked in any of the businesses that support either the transportation marketplace or support the supply of energy to those marketplaces, because you cannot switch overnight.
Here's something interesting. Here you sit, and you told me about your 35-year-long career in executive positions in business, ending with a decade at Shell US. Here you sit now talking about a role for government which smacks of the command economy. You want to create a new federal agency, a bit like the Federal Reserve, running the economy, running energy security policy for the United States in what can only be described as a massive new bureaucracy at the heart of Washington.
I write about that, and I suggest that as the next step in the evolution of U.S. government, because here's the facts. 8 U.S. presidents over the last 36 years have promised the American people energy independence, and 18 Congresses have gone along with those 8 presidents, and the U.S. is in worse condition today than when it started down this energy independence path with Richard Nixon. The 2-year, 4-year cycle, the partisanship, the dysfunctionality of government has totally stymied the ability of the United States to look out for its future. I'm suggesting learn from history. The Federal Reserve came into being in 1913 because of the stability, because of the continuity and predictability, because of depoliticizing monetary policy. The U.S. became the world's largest economy, won 2 world wars for freedom during that century, and has the world's most stable monetary system, bar none, over that 97-year period since the Federal Reserve was created. I'm suggesting that the depoliticizing of energy by creation of an independent regulatory commission run by a board of governors who, importantly, know what they're doing, separate and apart from Congress. Congress doesn't know what it's doing in most cases with respect to energy policy, or they wouldn't be doing what they've done, because they haven't solved the problem.
Here's the problem I see. In essence, you're arguing 2 different positions. On the one hand, you're saying we have to stick to this notion of delivering affordable energy, and if that means we stick with the status quo, even though it has serious implications for climate change and pollution, so be it, at least for now. On the other hand, you're saying, no, we're in big trouble. We have to have a new, powerful government agency capable of delivering dramatic and, yes, painful change. These are 2 very different positions, and you're trying to argue them both at the same time.
That's right. It's a both-and solution. We are where we are. There's an expression in this country, I'd rather not be in Philadelphia, but if you're in Philadelphia, you're there. What has to happen is the here and now has to be taken care of for a period of time, while a transitional plan gets developed and implemented. And over a sustained period of commitment of decades, It's my belief that we can transition from where we are to a cleaner, sustainable, affordable energy future, but not if we keep doing what we are doing.
Before we end, I want to bring it back to big oil, because it's rare, frankly, to have a very senior executive of one of the biggest oil companies in the world, albeit now retired for a couple of years, who's prepared to chew over, honestly, some of the issues at the heart of the oil industry. Are you now prepared to say to me that big oil, particularly the sorts of companies like Shell that you worked for, have been part of the problem when it comes to climate change and all of the problems we now face?
I think if you look historically, the answer to your question is yes. Over many, many decades, the oil companies doing what they do best, which is producing oil, have contributed to some of the despoilation of land, water, and air. No question about that.
And why is it, if I may just interject, why is it, do you think, that companies like Exxon, it now turns out, despite assurances given 2 or 3 years ago that they'd stop funding groups that challenge the very scientific basis of climate change, it now turns out have, in the last financial year, still been funding some of those groups. I dare say other big oil companies may be doing the same thing. Why is it that for all of the rhetoric, the green and sustainable rhetoric, big oil still seems to have such a fundamental problem with this?
Well, I think it is wrong to characterize big oil as homogeneous. I think there's a lot of diversification and differentiation among the large oil companies, where certain companies will take a particular approach to their political life in whatever governments they operate with, and other companies will take a somewhat different approach to that. And so there is no one unanimous view that puts all oil companies under the same guidance, so to speak. I think to label all of the companies together is wrong. I can't explain why Exxon would do what Exxon does. That's really their business,
Yeah.
and they have the right to do that. But I would say that going forward and looking at the last decade or longer, there are numerous energy companies like Shell and others that have made a serious effort to be socially responsible and to amend the practices of the past so that it can have a clear path forward on a more sustainable future.
We have to end there. John Hofmeister in New York City, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.